All right, welcome this morning to our budget meetings. We have the Sheriff's Department in here. Looks like we're going to be in here for a good part of the day anyway. So it's good to have you here. As always with this process, which is multi-step, this is more informational, just kind of a little two-way back and forth and a little understanding as to why and where we're at and what we're trying to project and go forward to. And so, Sheriff, it's always good to have you here.
Thank you.
Why don't you start us off and walk us through
All right, we
the
will.
budget?
First off, let's, as far as a plan on how we want to present today, we would like to mostly have the two chief deputies, well, three chief deputies. Of course, the Eagle Mountain one is less complicated based on the fact that it's a contract, so there's either funding or there isn't. But the three chief deputies to present each of their interests over their bureaus, with the Enforcement Bureau and the Corrections Bureau, and then the contract Eagle Mountain. And then occasionally, if there are questions, clarifications, or something goes to a political side based on, philosophy or politics, myself or Under Sheriff Forshee may step up and answer some questions. But in our preparations this year, we involved even more so than at any other time the chief deputies in correlation with their lieutenants, so that we could fully understand at that level the interaction between the needs for both the bureaus as it relates to one another and a total budget, plus the intimacy for each bureau's budget between the lieutenants and the chief deputies. So we'd like to proceed with that.
So you're going to go with enforcement first and then
We'll go with
corrections?
enforcement first,
Okay.
unless you have a preference.
No,
It
I
doesn't
was
matter to
just
us.
looking at how
Yes.
to organize my.
No, yes, if
my
you look
notes
at the
here.
way it's organized, we'll go
Well,
ahead.
in our
and-
binder, just FYI, after enforcement, we have wildland fire, so maybe.
Okay, we could do that.
While he preps, we can.
Sure.
Go to that right after that
Sure,
part.
we could do that. All right. So we'll go ahead and start with enforcement, and I'll invite up Chief Deputy Brower.
Good morning.
Morning.
Like the sheriff said, I'm going to rely on lieutenants for, some in-depth questions. They've worked on preparing their additional requests along with some justification. I may bounce back to Daleen for some moral support as well. In the Enforcement Bureau, we have our Emergency Services Division, Judicial Division, Patrol, Investigations, and Wildland Fire. So there's quite a bit of activity going on between those. In preparation for the budget, we took the initial allocation monies that were sent to us by the auditor and put those numbers into the budget. Initially, I had each lieutenant transfer and make the amendments before we realized it was the 2016 numbers we were going on. So we just kind of transferred 2017 over, and I realized I needed to cut 39,700 to meet that number that was sent over. So I did make those cuts in certain parts of the in the budget, which are under those additional requests, the priority one, and it kind of breaks down which.
So
Which
the only
items we
question I
took.
have then on number one, where it says 39.7 for operational funds to replace cuts, are any of the following items 2 through 31 contained in that 39.7 amount?
No,
Okay.
no, those are not. Those are
Is there a
additional.
list somewhere of what those shortfalls would be in this budget?
Correct.
Where is that list? On my next page?
Second page
Okay.
after the additional budget request
Oh,
is the
yes.
line, the priority numbers, and then it goes, says which priority.
So
and
it's
then it
all
goes
just
up.
time limited and overtime, so
Yeah,
staffing.
time limited and overtime funds that I made the cuts there to make it a little
Okay.
easier to find them all the cuts there. And as that priority list goes down, obviously, we are gonna try to be as efficient we can with any remaining funds that we have this year to kind of help supplement and purchase some of those items if we can articulate or find that funding in the existing budget this year. Some of those, we probably will not be able to, but the ones that we can, that's the intent.
Some one-time purchases and so forth. Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah. Mhm.
Like the software in number 2. I thought we already did that transfer for the forensic from the attorneys?
So that is when we made that transition from the county attorneys to the forensic lab, there is an annual cost associated with software fees.
So because we did it in 17, it wasn't in the 16 budget, there, that's the request.
Correct. It was in a
Okay.
restricted account, so we're requesting it be put down into our regular
Okay.
line item for operational purposes.
So the 21,000 is a renewal?
Yeah, so if we
Yearly
go
renewal.
to that priority 2, the 21,562 is a software renewal for the software needed to operate specific portions of the lab.
Okay.
And then down below that with the request for forensic along with the lab is to obtain that funding for training to become certified in many aspects of the lab. It kind of breaks it down as to what it is and how much is needed for that training, an estimate of how much is needed for that training.
So do they move that training, or is it only in Orlando once a year, or is it, so next year it would be in San Diego, or?
Correct. They would change that. Some of them may be in the same place because that's where the software, the headquarters is, so it may be there, but usually they bounce it around the country.
Yeah.
Like with many of the other trainings that go on throughout the year. So those priority 2 are just to keep the lab operational and also obtain those certifications needed to testify in court on some of these cases that come through. Just an update with that lab, it's going to be a huge asset for the county as a whole. We're going to be able to be a lot more efficient and keep things within the county, not rely on others and time and if they can get to it. So it'll be a huge resource for us.
Is this additional budget, and you have it listed in priority, and that is your priority?
Yes, that would be a
Okay.
priority just for operation of that lab. Like I'd mentioned, when the lab came over from the county attorney's office, that was in a restricted, and we just want it in operational. Now, that training portion, could go down as certifications come available. As soon as we get a couple people certified in different areas of Celebrite or any of the other software certifications, once they're certified, obviously we won't need to send them to that extensive training.
Yeah,
again.
I know it says priority number and it has it listed down there. I've just been
But
asking.
not everybody has
I've
done
just
it.
been asking everybody if this is your priority list. If you said, okay, you got everything, if you only get one thing on here, you'd want number 1.
If I could make them all number 1, I would.
Yeah, I realize that. But I'm-
Yeah, these first 2, 3 items are.
I'll bet you can highlight a couple in there that I'm gonna hit you on.
I know. I know, but
That's the reason why I'm asking this question. Is this kind of the priority as you see it?
yes, I put the first few as operational, needed for operational objectives to accomplish our goals and objectives. So the first 2, 3 there are just that,
So-
operational.
The only thing that, the training, for example, that goes with that, it doesn't necessarily show those in a priority, right? So like, are there certain trainings that are more essential that if, you know what I mean, as far
Sure.
as, so is crime scene certification more important than Cellbrite? I don't know.
Sure, and I think Doug will be here, or Eric Knudsen can help me with that, but yes, there are certain ones that we would need that are a little more high priority, and then if we had to, we could wait, but I'll let Eric kind of address that if.
Okay.
Good morning, I'm Eric Knudsen, so I'm the lieutenant of our investigations team.
Make sure you speak in the mic so
Oh, sorry.
everybody on YouTube can hear you.
So to answer your question, they kind of go hand in hand, and so when we develop that position itself, and we have the crime scene technicians, part of their pay is based on getting certified as a crime scene technician, so they have to go through that certification. Then when you talk about the certification like the Celebrite, that's a tool that we use in order to get into our cell phones to be able to extract information, and there's a certification that comes with that as well. So they're both kind of go hand in hand. They're both required in order for us to function at the level that the county attorney wants us to function at.
Okay, great, thank you.
Number 3 then goes into, on that priority list, is on-call funding for the SVU, correction, I'm sorry about that. The on-call for victim advocates and forensic technicians. Currently, we don't have any funding to pay them an on-call. So it's just, we hope that they're available when something happens in the county, and usually they're very, very good to come out. But we feel like we owe it to them to at least have them on call for a week, each one of them for a week, and they rotate through. That way, they kind of feel required to come out if they're that on call.
How many victim advocates do you have? Is it
3.
2.5? 3?
3
3 fully grant funded? 2.5. I was gonna say, the
2.5.
half is the Spanish grant. Right, and that's what I meant. She split half, but they're all grant funded.
Correct, yeah.
Is
So
that,
we
is that
rotate.
sufficient for your guys' needs?
The victim advocates?
Because I don't see any requests for additional victim advocates on here.
As far as a priority, I think the 2.5, obviously, we'd like to have 3 as
Well-
a full-time.
Priority or not, it's not on here at all,
Right.
and that's what I'm saying, because the attorney's department thinks that their 2 isn't enough, that they need 3.5 more or something like that, but they do the back half of what you guys do on the front half. So, and not everything goes to trial, so you guys would have more than them. So my question is the need being met from your standpoint?
We believe the need, excuse me, for YouTube, and I've watched, I listened to the attorneys talk and their request for more people. We believe the on-call will be able to put us into a few years without another
Okay.
person. So that's kind of why we're going down that road versus asking for a
Perfect, thank you.
And then along with that, the forensic techs responding to crime scenes, coming out on an on-call type basis would help in our abilities to facilitate that as well.
Sheriff Tracy again. As you know, FLSA requires that if we require them to respond, then we have to have this on-call pay. Otherwise, they don't have to respond. They don't have to be available to respond. That's just a FLSA issue that the government has pressed upon us, that if you have somebody on call and you are required to respond if you are in that on-call period, then there must be, I think it's a minimum of like $1.25 an hour that is the on-call pay. That's
Right.
that would cover that.
And as, you know, as a point, I know we have talked about that as well, as that $1.25 an hour. I think that was initiated in 1980-something, 1985. So obviously, we would like to continue to move forward and seeing what we can't do, compare. I know they just, you know, in the middle of that market study, but start looking at other
I
avenues
think
and
that
what other
one's set
people are
by the
doing.
state, though.
I think so.
So, you know,
Yeah.
some talking point that we could look down the road here a little bit.
We've
But
copied it off of the state, I believe, is what I meant. So the rate's consistent throughout, from what I remember seeing.
yeah, and
If you
each,
see differently, please send it to me.
so jurisdictions, you know, we've done some research and they've done it, each jurisdiction does it a little bit differently, and Lieutenant Prashant could, you know, ask, he's done some research on that, and he
Yeah,
could
please send it.
articulate that pretty good. Priority number 4, this is the UCAP program, the probation program that we have started. We added the 2 positions over in our judicial division along with an office specialist. When those became, this is another one where we had some restricted funding put aside for cost, department supplies. As we're going along with this, program is becoming fairly successful. We're capped already. We're ahead of the pace that Salt Lake started their program with our numbers. We could take a lot more into the program if we had, you know, obviously more bodies to deal with it, but the program in its trial phase and infancy is becoming pretty successful, and I'll send over some research a little bit later, some analysis of how that program's going, but we're asking for some funding to cover operational costs for that UCAP program, that probation unit, which would include new client assessments, evaluations, special department supplies.
This is in addition.
Correct.
Just a quick note on that. It's been very successful. Remember, this was the 2-year program that we presented to the county. It cost us about $250,000, but we have maxed out the numbers that the 2 deputies that are the probationary checkers, if that's what you want to call them, the people who do the field work, can handle as far as numbers. But it's been very successful. We're keeping people out of jail, so that helps on the back end. But the cost of the tests, the screenings, part of that 10,000 will help cover those costs that are hard costs that we can't get around, so that we can do those screenings to see who does qualify for that program initially. But it's been very successful. And again, that kind of goes part and parcel with the philosophy where JRI and the state is headed, with trying to do more treatment versus incarceration. And it frankly surprises how quickly it filled up in this county. And the fact is that, talking to the judges, that they probably will, or not probably, they will have additional people they could move into that program if we had the capacity.
So what you said, Sheriff, makes 100% sense to me on that increase. What I'm losing here is when it says special department supplies, I don't understand why 2 deputies and 1 civilian office specialist need flashlights, binoculars for testing. I guess I don't
Part
understand
of-
the program well enough.
Well, yes, part of what they do is the probationary function of that too. They're also looking for violations and watching these people as they come and go and checking
So
on
they
them
are
that
out of
they're-
the office?
They are out of the
Okay.
office, yeah. These are not
Okay.
static positions. They're out there looking for violations of their probationary
Okay.
terms. So they do field work. So they do, and it is night and day.
Okay.
As part of
Makes
their,
sense.
as part of their, signing up for the program, the probation deputies go out at night, check on work, check on home to make sure they're where they're supposed to be. So that's part of that
Okay.
process as well. And again, in articulating the priorities, as we go through it, it's difficult. Everyone has needs. The number 5 there, a deputy 2 position for the justice court security. And I think this has been communicated before. There's no full-time position currently to run that security. Position is critical to the safety of the courtroom and the staff, citizens who are in there. We depend on part-time deputies to man that, and our part-time deputies are usually law enforcement from other entities that have a hard time coming to work during the day because there are other jobs there
What if
as
they
well.
decertify the court from the county standpoint?
What's that?
What if they decertify the court? Would that be necessary?
I'm not sure how that would work if they decertified the court from the county, if it went some
Well,
other avenue.
they've threatened, I guess. They've talked about decertifying our justice courts. So would that position be necessary if they do that? Okay.
Yeah. If we didn't have a court, we wouldn't need a position there. I don't know how they would accomplish and where they would go and
Well,
take care of those issues. but
Decertifying, we still have to have the court. It doesn't,
Doesn't eliminate the problem to take care of those citations and.
No, it's just a threat, and that's why I wondered how or what we would do. That's why I'm asking you guys
Where would
what
we
you.
send our B and C misdemeanors?
That's a good question. Obviously, maybe to Provo.
Oh, yeah. I read that article. Well, if we have a court, we would need security.
Right.
Put it that way.
Right.
I don't know what condition the state would call it, or whatever they decertify or certify, but, wow.
You know, one of the main reasons for this kind of being a priority is obviously for the safety of the court and the patrons coming in and out, preventing weapons, things like that coming in. Also, there's been some letters written by Kathy. and
Does the
Judge
state give
Corbin.
you any money from the AOC to help keep that court secure? Is that just fully something you have to do?
That's us.
It's just us.
I
And
knew
as
that-
you know,
I knew
the
that
state's-
answer, but I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure everybody in the public knew that as they
Yeah, there's
continue to
no
threaten.
state funding for that position.
Right.
so you have a bailiff over there, right? 2 bailiffs over there, and then whenever I've been over there, and it's not often, but whenever it seems like there's two deputies right there by the entrance.
Mhm.
And so this is in addition to that.
This is, go ahead and come on up, Chip. This is, so occasionally you'll see one that's a facility security, and then if they're short or have more power, those come in. But Lieutenant Shipman can address that.
Yeah, Lieutenant Sean Chipman. We have facility security, that's where you see Larry. He's downstairs. And then upstairs, we have the security checkpoint, and then we have the two deputy bailiffs that are in the courts. We don't have a full-time position, as Chief Deputy Brower said, so we have to bring in part-timers. When they can't come, we're having to bring Larry up, or Deputy Evans. When Deputy Evans is up, you don't have facility security.
I see, okay.
So if anything happens, you know, on county grounds over here, you're gonna get a delayed response. Or we'll have like a Sergeant Willis come in, and you have a sergeant doing Deputy 2 work at that point. And now he's not being able to respond to, you know, his duties as well because he's at the checkpoint.
Well, and you may or may not, maybe the sheriff might have to answer this one. Didn't we used to have our own dedicated security for this, or is that just something we talked about? I know we talked about it a couple years ago. Okay, okay. Yeah, I know we've had serious talks about it for a couple years. But not for just the justice court, for the county facilities. Yeah.
And we do have, we have had letters written from the court staff over there just expressing their concerns. And I think those may have been relayed to you. If not, you know, we can get those to you as well. Number 6 there goes down through training
Oh,
needs.
sorry, I have to go back to this one
Bet.
because it's not quite. So are you saying then that there are times in which it's just wide open and people are walking through?
Yes,
Okay.
which is why I put it kind of towards the top of the priority list there.
That usually during times in which they don't have court, or, I mean, are you trying to schedule with them?
Yes, we're trying, anytime court's in session, always they're looking at that.
Oh, I see, okay.
They take fine payments all day long, and when people come in with their citations and they start, you know, putting together the court appearances, so the court staff is there all day long, whether the court's in session or not. So we've had increased issues where they have been accosted, argumentative, with people coming in with their citations or trying to pay their fines. And there's been no one there to help make sure that the guy that's coming in there, the persons coming in there, aren't armed or don't have a way to you know, initiate something with a weapon.
And are the bailiffs there full-time?
During the court times, yes, they are.
Just during court times?
Thank you.
They also shuffle, during court times they're there, and the other times they may transfer to the 4th District Court, to the juvenile court to help
Oh,
out if
okay.
somebody's on vacation or sick. They're doing an extremely good job with allocating, trying to get manpower where it's needed to cover those courts. So when it's not in session, those bailiffs will kind of bounce over to other courts to help out if people are off, you know.
So
sick.
who covers then, like, so in a month, you guys will be here for the treasurer's department when the lines are here. So who covers that? Because court's still in session and stuff like that going on. So do we just assign normal patrol deputies, or is that?
Usually it'll be, you know, like Sergeant Willis or anybody that we can find available to come over and cover that, but correct me if I'm wrong, but that's anybody that we can find that's available. If we have to send somebody that's not busy at 4th
I was gonna
District
say, we don't
Court or-
pull from them or necessarily.
Yeah, it usually stays within the division. Lieutenant Shipman will prioritize that and make sure somebody is here within that, and we won't have to use resources from patrol and anywhere else. So 6 just kind of goes down through some needs we have identified throughout the Enforcement Bureau for training. And a majority of that, the first one there is patrol, is to obtain some funds to bring in some training. With the training funds we have available, we maybe only send 1 sergeant out of the 7 that we have. to a decent training. So our funds kind of enable us to train every sergeant and get some quality training for some of these deputies that we need. So we're asking for some funds to bring in at least 2 trainings, so most of the division, and we can obviously expand that a little bit throughout, but we can get some of these trainings that are imperative that would include use of force, search and seizure, leadership and supervision. And along with that is preparing our people to promote. They need a mid-level mid-management certification. That's part of the process for their promotion. If they have that, they get a few extra points in the testing process. And without training funds, without the ability to get them, it becomes difficult for these guys who want to promote to have that kind of check off on that list. Then it goes
Have you
down.
identified potential people to come in and do these trainings yet?
No, well, Lieutenant Yvette Rice can document that. We've looked at some. I don't think we've specifically identified anybody specific.
She's been too busy because the commission's been talking to her about contract cities.
Yeah, she's been busy. Lieutenant Hodson, they've been a little, but they may have, I'm not sure if they have or not specifically, but they can answer that.
Lieutenant Tom Hodson. Lieutenant Rice and myself, we've looked at several vendors. We have not yet identified one specifically to bring in because we want the cost to be what we can pay, our ability to pay those things. Some of them are very exorbitant. They want travel fees. They want,
Sure.
you know, so we're trying to find the best bang for our buck right now to get those
And
identified.
the real question is one, because the commission in tradition, when we've been asked to fund trainings and stuff, we like to see who it is and
Correct.
make sure it matches the plan and,
Right.
you know, some of those things. So that's why I asked that question. So,
We're doing some of that homework, so when we present it to you guys, then it'll be
the sooner the better, because these are,
certainly.
to me, that's an important aspect of who we're bringing in and what it's gonna help. So because you've listed ultimately reduce the liability, you're right, the right training can.
Right.
And so I'd like to see that if we can get that before.
And then
too
Chief
long.
Brower touched on the bid management certification. We currently, on your bid management certification, if our deputies have that in the promotional process, that gives them 5 additional points, which that 5 additional points, if you have a list with your top 3 that are within 1.25 points of each other, that 5 additional points will certainly help some of our guys get promoted where they want to be. So that's the reason for that request as well.
And to add to that, Post recognizes certain trainings toward that certification. The problem for us is that the majority of those trainings aren't offered on a local basis.
Right.
So in order to achieve that, we do have to send people out of area. Now, we do always prioritize for supervisors because we believe that they bear the brunt of liability for our county. But we do try to support the progression of deputies' careers. It's just hard with the funds that we currently have available to us.
Sure. And I've always supported actually the bringing trainings from out to in so we can maximize however many and.
We think that's more cost effective.
Yeah, I do too.
It's also prohibitive to send too many people out of, even locally, out of the force, because then we have to cover all the
Sure,
holes, and that
especially where we're
significantly
short on
impacts our
staffing
overtime
plan
and
anyway.
on and on and on, right.
Thank you.
And along with that, just to kind of show what we've been trying to do to obtain that, we've brought in, tried to host trainings ourselves. You guys have known through the canine school, the recent motor school, trying to get training coming in so we can take more advantage of that as a larger group. Then just below the administrative service, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, one more question to that. Part of the ways to minimize the cost is inviting other entities, whether it's
Correct.
cities or other counties. We will do that as well, right?
Yeah, we'd love
Because
to offset our cost by,
county has a convention
Charging.
center with a couple parking spots that we could always make available.
that's right.
A couple.
But that would
You
be.
could park on the street if you guys aren't patrolling the 2-hour parking limit, then we, I know. But if you invite them, then they'd be in there and, and then there's more.
True though, that when we host something, that is the biggest bang for the buck, because then they usually give us 3 slots as far as the instructor that's coming here, and we use our facilities which already exist, so it is.
Right. Well, and they can help defray some of the costs and,
Yeah. And that goes right in line with the next one, that administrative services request, to get it countywide. I mean, it would be more for the sheriff's office as a whole, for those liabilities, use of force things, dealing with corrections, but to open that up to outside too, to kind of offset some of those funds there. Number 7, this is a follow from last year, the emergency services for search and rescue operations on the lake. We were able to get 2 snowmobiles last year, and obviously if we can locate those funds within this year, we may be able to pull that off. But as far as the jet skis, they're currently, we have several sets, 2 sets that are 12 to 14 years old, and they're wearing out. Lieutenant Prashant is,
This is the one that I've always talked about for the last couple of years because it's one that's misunderstood by us up here a lot. Reason being is I thought I asked, and if I didn't, I apologize. So now I'm officially asking. What I want is a breakdown of how many you have, how old they are, because a couple got replaced a couple of years ago. So we think, oh, well, we funded jet skis. When the reality is you have 8 and there's a reason and you can tell us why we need 8 or whatever the real number is. Same with the snowmobiles. Just because we bought 2 doesn't mean the need to replace them in a year or 2 because of the older ones that are there. So I would like to see a breakdown of all the assets there, how old they are, and the plan to replace them and their use over time so that we can actually get on a schedule so that, quite honestly, this doesn't have to be discussed every year and we can come and say, this is part of the plan for the next 10 years. They're on a cycle, then we can either capitalize them or whatever so that they're just on a replacement schedule.
I think you're right, the capitalization of what needs to happen, but Lieutenant Prashant can kind of delve into that.
Lieutenant Prashant, Emergency Services Division. I believe it was last year we submitted that plan you requested, spelled out the age of each one and the plan going forward, and it was part of the capitalization request as well.
If you'll resend it, because I don't have it.
Yeah, no problem. But this is the oldest set we have, 2003, that are smaller engines as well. We've spent a lot of maintenance the last couple of years just to keep them going. So that was, I don't know if any other questions, but we'll resubmit that information for you.
What's the need, I mean, in the sense of,
We have
how much is it
to-
being used
quick-
on?
A quick picture is we have 8 of them, so we can have 4 teams go different places, and they're our go-to for rough water. So when the water gets rough out there, that's what we have to be able to respond. And they also allow us to go in more shallow areas as well. And we have
The
the
needs
airboat for the,
increasing? I mean, I'm just wondering if, we're going out there 2 times a month, 4 times a year?
Depends on the algae bloom.
yeah, this last year or 2 has really, our calls on the lake have come quite down because of the algae
Right.
situation. But normally we have, I would say, 20 calls on the water a year, and it's a go-to piece of equipment.
So that's kind of an average, 20 calls on the water.
I'd
The
have
oth-
to
the other
double check
issue,
that.
though, is that this equipment also is not just for locating. They attach sleds to the back of it to bring victims off the water who've fallen in. A boat does not operate well in those rough, shallow conditions that this lake exhibits. So to get back into those very shallow, narrow areas that are near the reeds, these work the best to get in and out and actually bring people, like on the sleds that they attach and the other medical assistance that they can do. So it's really a workhorse. They're more efficient than just 1 or 2 single bigger boats because we can also spread out when the need is to find and locate the individuals that are still missing. You can put out 4 teams if all these are working.
So the only other question I have is, since 2003, when you acquired this one, we have added a boat that will go on those waters, right?
We've added an airboat that will
Right.
go on the shores, so it's not made for any deep water. So anything more than a couple feet,
Okay.
you shouldn't be there.
Okay, and that was really my question is the boat able to assist in some of the same stuff? And it sounds like it depends.
Only on the shore and only
Okay.
if conditions are right. If the
Okay.
waves
That-
settle down, it's able to go into deeper water. But we have, the only other boats we have is state parks boats. They have a 24 and a 27-inch or 27-foot Boston Whalers that they're able to go, but their draft is significantly more than the other boat we're requesting as well, so.
So why 4 teams? Why not 8 teams? Why not 2 teams? Just wondering.
4 teams, because
Okay.
that's what's worked. You always make sure you have 2 people together at least, but generally they'll stick together, but they have the ability to break away into do 2 different areas or 4 different areas, depending on the type of call we have.
And frankly, it's a matter of cost. I mean, you know, if you could put 8 teams out and fully fund that, it would be better for location and quicker times of downtime between the location time and the time of assistance. But there is a matter of when cost and efficiency.
Yeah, that's the
So
reason
on
why.
all those 20 calls, are all 4 teams going out?
Most of the time when we have calls on the lake, all the jet skis will deploy.
Okay.
And we also deploy our air assets at the same time, so it's all coordinated efforts. So it depends on the call. We can go through,
So it's not one call, one team. Who the team that's on call? It's the call, all resources. Okay.
yes,
Although we call them 4 teams, they're all one group.
That's correct.
That's
One
true.
response,
That's
within
true.
one
That's true.
response, yes.
Yeah, within, okay. So who gets to pick which one gets which machine? Is the first one on, or?
Rank.
No, we get to know our volunteers and their skill levels, and often we'll say, sorry, you're not going, depending on the weather conditions, and so we've done that before.
Okay.
No grants, huh, for that? Okay. Yeah, last year for the snowmobiles, we had some bids. Have we started that? Have you looked and had bids?
Number 8, there is just an increase in the maintenance fee for the Faro machine and evidence. That Faro machine is taken out to crime scenes to do 3D imaging, cuts time way down from actually being out there diagramming, and it gives us a better exact measurements.
I
without
say,
some
we bought
human
this
error.
3 years ago. We've been using it 3 or 4 years now.
We've been using it for several years, last several years. I think we've
Was the year
upgraded
after
it.
Corey was shot, so it was 2015.
Yeah.
But it's proven itself, just in the, you know, obviously just at crime scenes, being able to take away the human factor a little bit and getting those exact measurements and being able to provide a 3D image and bring that back for great case
Which is why I've
presentation.
wondered why we have a whole bunch of trailers going out to collect evidence in other departments. Because it seems like this has eliminated some of that need.
Some of it, and, you know, as the sheriff has talked before, our desire to get a countywide crime scene put together, a crime scene team to put together to go out and handle some of these bigger, to take away some of those issues that the county has had in the past, that's something we're working toward, and this is a big part of that.
Is that discussed then at like the chiefs meeting last week?
Yes.
How they coming with it?
Well, they're waiting to see a final plan from me.
Okay.
And it can go go one of 2 different ways, which it probably is an offline topic, but there is a critical need. These smaller agencies do not have the capacity or the capability, no matter what their tax levels are, their manpower levels, to bring that kind of expertise. And so when that affects the county attorney's opportunity to present a good case for conviction, and as we know,
Well, but even no matter how small they are, all I'm looking at is that this $2,800 request. If some of those cities help absorb a couple $100,
some of them are willing to do that.
then there's not even a request, right? And that's why I wondered how that was coming.
Well, to put in a significant package to cover the total need would be significantly more than this. But I think it's time. They have been asking whether or not we wanted to go which way with this, whether the county was going to fund this or whether they were going to try to, you know, make a fee and assess it to each department. I haven't
Well,
come down on that yet.
I would say like Everbridge.
Okay,
That
could
would be
part
my
of the,
preference. If the county ever moves in that, we should have partners,
Okay.
not users.
right, understand.
That's
So
my-
we can have that discussion then, and I can move forward in that regard, and just try to put something together that would cover parts of those costs.
Would want willing partners.
Yes.
Well, they're out there. Some of the chiefs have come to me and said they're willing to pay. Of course, they don't know what that means when they represent, how much money that would be, but they are willing to put funds into those things.
Yeah.
Number 9 is just a request for additional overtime throughout the Enforcement Bureau, and it's a breakdown, shows a breakdown of what, patrol, additional overtime of 10,000 to cover a second mandatory training day for personnel to obtain some of those certifications related to CPR, radar and toxilizer, sobriety testing, arrest and control,
Windshield replacements.
windshield replacements, anything else that comes along. And they're mandated to have 40 hours a year for that training. Correct. Courts, judicial. With the 40 hours mandatory by post, we need to keep these deputies up to speed and up to date with their training hours, and we're finding it a little difficult with the mandatory 1 day we have set aside to do that. We need a little bit more there. Emergency services can kind of go down through that search and rescue, but we've been consistent in expending the overtime budget by approximately 5,000 a year. Funding is crucial in performing search and rescue operations throughout the county. We rely on the volunteers extensively, and they're a phenomenal group of people, being out and watching them do their work, and they put in their own time and effort. Our guys are consistently there to run the command post, to provide the resources. So these funds are needed to keep that cooperation between our staff and the volunteer program meshing and working together. Obviously, our call, with all the people coming in, the canyons and everything else, like Lieutenant Prashant says, it varies on conditions and things, but we seem to be having more and more people up hiking places they shouldn't be hiking and doing those things. So that's why the 5,000 requests there. The Administrative Services Division is asking for $2,500 to help up at the range, specifically for public works, shooting days, and also maintenance work on repairing targets, steel targets, things like that up there. And they made a comment, and I'm not quite sure of this, but some of those funds, I'm not sure if they come out of the restaurant tax account or not for that, but
They would if the sheriff's department came and presented to the tab board. Because we have since changed the way the commission used to do that, and we are now complying with the ordinance. And so any additional requests to do stuff up there, all we need to do is come and, with the commission, we can get you on the calendar, we come and present and let them make a ruling, and then those funds could be used potentially. But you need to show why and how and, go through the
How
application.
it promotes
Yeah.
either tourism or
Yeah,
recreation.
so if you wanna get with Lisa, she has the applications, very easy process, at least for that standpoint.
okay.
Is that one time a year, or is that throughout the year?
No, it's throughout the year.
The presentations throughout the year? Okay, thank you.
Then the investigations specifically for the SVU unit, the last little bit, they've kind of gone over their allotment with those cases. It seems, as much of our work out in public safety, things happen at night, getting called out quite a bit to go out after hours and maintain those.
Who decides on this one? Again, this is going back to that other little comment I made on the trailers from the other group. Who decides whether the sheriff's department goes out or Jeff Buman's guys go out? Because sometimes we have both on the same one, and then we're paying overtime on both to do the same thing is what it looks like, but it's probably not, so.
Yeah, I don't know why the county attorney's office would be sending people out on sex abuse cases or child abuse cases. I haven't seen them out on any.
Okay, so they only go to a specific,
Yeah.
Okay.
If it's officer involved, protocol team, things like that. But as far as cases that come in the county jurisdictions related to sex offenses, child abuse.
I guess I was just looking at investigations as the broad term because,
Okay.
Not necessarily a specific type of
Specific
cases,
group.
but,
Yeah, this is just for the special victims unit over here. Number 10, the priority list, are requesting 2 additional deputy 3s to assist with administrative services. One would One would be responsible to help with the background, internal affairs investigations. I currently have one employee primarily responsible for those investigations. And background investigation can take anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks to complete. We've seen a huge increase. I apologize for the numbers on that. They're a little misprinted in there. The actual numbers that we're seeing between 2014 and 2015, we had 63 background investigations conducted. 2015 to 2016, 130 background investigations conducted. 2016 to 2017, 234. So we're seeing a dramatic increase. It's becoming a little overwhelming for these guys, the two guys over there, administrative services, one the lieutenant and one sergeant, to keep up with all the backgrounds and also internal affairs investigations. So that was the big request for that. And then also a Deputy 3 for training and firearms. Currently, the two we have over there are responsible for training just over 300 employees in firearms and regular qualifications with, rifle, shotguns, handguns, also the care and maintenance of those weapons. The program, they're running tight, especially with trying to be up there on the weekends with public and open those up too.
So on that request, it says total additional expense 53,685. That I understand because that's the standard equipment. But then it says plus carryover costs. What does that mean?
Sorry, where are you reading that?
I'm on that request, on this specific request. You've broken out the additional expenditures, which again, that's the standard equipment for any deputy. But then it says plus carryover cost of 72,535. What is a carryover cost? Is that just the benefits and salary? Okay, I didn't know, when you say carryover, I didn't know if we were pulling money from 2017 to help.
Oh,
fund.
yeah, salary and benefits.
Okay.
And also
Can I
those,
ask you a question on,
Yes.
maybe going back a little bit to the overtime stuff? So enforcement's 24/7, right?
correct.
And so, how does overtime play into 24/7 when you're out there? Not necessarily specific to one area, just on a philosophical basis. If you're patrolling 24/7, if you have investigators there 24/7, how does the overtime play into that scenario?
Okay, so the patrol division 24/7, we have patrol deputies out patrolling the county 24/7. Investigations are usually set schedules, so your regular detectives, your set team guys, your judicial guys are usually set schedules. Your 8 to 5, or
Okay.
they're working 10-hour shifts.
If it comes off that, then you have to pull them.
Yeah,
Pull
a
'em
deputy goes out on a major crime scene and needs somebody to process the scene, or it's a sex offense or child abuse where they need the detectives to come out, or it's a dead body, need them to come out and follow up with investigation. That's where the overtime comes into effect on those. And then obviously overtime, if it's patrol, dealing with overtime, people being off, sick or vacation, we've gotta fill those seats to have
So it's
deputies
a
out.
need base then?
Well, and also occasionally, near the end of your shift, if somebody drives out in front of you and you end up with a DUI arrest at the end of your shift, it's a timing issue that you can't control. So now you have to follow that paperwork and the arrest procedure through till you get the individual booked into jail. And your shift ended, and 30 minutes before it ended, you
Yeah.
ended up getting this guy as a DUI. So now you've got another hour and a half, what you've got to put him into jail, get the paperwork done, and so you've accumulated overtime that you can't just switch over to somebody else who's already out.
Yeah, and I totally understand those. I'm just wondering on a management style, how do you manage that though, so that because you're always, managers typically are trying to keep the overtime numbers down as much as possible through management, so how do you manage that so that it minimizes that overtime?
We try to minimize, obviously, as best we can. The lieutenant, they have an on-call sergeant specifically for, say, investigations. If a call comes in, it goes to the sergeant who determines if it's needed to send somebody out or not to expend that overtime. So we have a process in place where where we deem if it's appropriate or not to send them out. We just don't let people respond, a couple of them. We'll dictate if it's obviously if it's a death investigation or something, we'll probably need 2 guys to go out at least, to go notify family, to go find witnesses, depending on if it's how intense it is or how difficult the case may be. You may need 4. So they'll dictate and decide how much manpower, taking obviously into account what's the best, as far as the resources needed.
I think really to answer your question, there is a process. In other words, a deputy who comes across something just can't call and say, I need 2 detectives, and they come out. So they would call the on-call detective sergeant, who then vets the case with the deputy and then decides what manpower is needed. So there's a process of decision that is not just an automatic call where people go out.
Yeah, okay.
And, on the patrol side as well, we'll run as short as we can. We won't go below, 5 guys out there. So if we need that, if we're dipping below that, we'll have to have somebody come out for overtime, but we've got a place.
I know there's a balance in there, on where that's at and what's appropriate for it. I mean, obviously, you just don't want a cat stuck up the tree and, 4
Right,
deputies
5
there
guys
and
coming
3
out
of them are on
overtime.
overtime, right? That would,
That's correct. Yeah, and that was my assurance to you, is that those processes for review by the appropriate person who understands what the need is, like the sergeant on
Right.
call and detectives, it's reviewed before it's resources are just sent.
yeah, right, okay.
And they'll also, the sergeants also, if it's overcrowded, they'll send people home. We don't need these resources anymore. We'll also try to flex hours as well if we see, okay, you're in a position where you can go home the following day for a few hours to make up for that time that you spent out that night. We'll try to flex those as well.
That was one of our frustrations with Workday as it comes on board, is we do flex those hours. So you have a detective that comes out on a Sunday night, and he works 5 hours. He may not come in Monday morning. And so those set schedules of Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, that doesn't work for us, because we will flex those, and not make the guy come in that morning, which does cut down on
And
the overtime.
that bears the importance of the supervisor,
Yes.
Yes, yes.
because
'Cause
that's
he's-
where they
he'll
need
have
to
to
be in
input that.
place to know what's going on, and they
Right.
should know, and that, so in Workday's scenario, the supervisor plays a lot more of a critical
Yes.
role when it
Yes.
comes to that.
Yeah, because our understanding is they'll have to put that
Yeah, and they can put
hours
comments
in
there.
as a deference from the normal whatever set hours are in the Workday program.
But we do try to manage the overtime in that realm, saying, okay, yeah, you work till 4 o'clock, 4 AM Sunday, don't worry about coming in Monday until noon, type of thing.
Thank you.
Bouncing down to number 11.
I've been reading it, that's why I'm chuckling. Not because of the request, the note for service.
Yes, and this came up last year as well. I mean, it seems to be a continual thing. These are motorcycles that weren't capitalized, and we're running into issues with maintenance. We're running into issues if you're kind of getting older.
Wait, we're not capitalized?
These are not capitalized. They came from grant or private donation.
Okay, then, that doesn't make sense to me. 26,200 to replace all 3, but yet the cost is between 16,700 and 17,400.
That is selling the current 3 we have back to the dealership.
Back to them.
Yep, selling them back to the dealership. That's 26,200 would be the cost for 3 new ones. And that way we could get them capitalized every 2 years, get them back in. And we are, like you kind of chuckled at that bottom, we are having some issues with maintenance on these. We recently had one deputy driving down I-15 and oil starts going all over his clothes, down his boots. Ends up, the repairs weren't put back together right.
Send the bill plus some to Public Works and let's see how they like it in return.
And it's difficult if they don't work on that brand of vehicle often. Mistakes happen, but we just feel it'd be a lot more prudent and efficient to have these capitalized and repaired through the dealer.
I'm with you. On the record, I am not a fan of our, not that they don't do good work, I'm just not a fan of the process, and quite honestly, fleet services needs to be overhauled, in my opinion, but I'm a person. And all they need to do is, if they really wanna know why, they can come and talk to me about, Under Sheriff Forsey's experience of the latest one. That's just one of 1,000 that I've heard since I've been here.
Well, it's hit, it's kinda hit and miss. Those guys do
That's
a
the
great
problem.
job.
That is the problem. The problem for me is that we're expending overtime funds for the sheriff's department when those gentlemen could, or I shouldn't say gentlemen, those officers, those deputies could be out doing their job. And so we are expending a lot of money, a lot of downtime on assets that could be handled very differently, whether it's through dealers or, they can tell me that Jiffy Lube doesn't do the same. Well, guess what? I can go to my Honda dealer and buy 3 services for an entire year for $99, or doesn't matter. And I'm here to tell you the dealership does everything that they do because they take care of all warranty repair, So anyway,
Yeah, that's something to,
but
be evaluated on a consistent basis. I know I've been to mechanics before, I've been so frustrated. Not necessarily the motor pool, but my own personal car, and what do you mean you need it for 2
and
days?
so I didn't mean to get off on that tangent, but going back to the Harleys,
Okay,
aside from parades and the county fair, I do know that they are up in the canyons. The part that's always bothered me on the canyon portion is, because I don't know the answer, what do we do with their Tahoes or whatever they have while they're on those bikes? Because they're always assigned a vehicle, they just go on those patrols up on the bikes, right?
yeah, so those vehicles will obviously just sit for that day, that shift that they're on those bikes. Obviously, weather plays a huge factor if they're gonna ride them or not. They're off of them in the winter.
Sure.
Inclement weather.
And
those type of
I
things.
guess that's my concern is, what can they do on the motorcycles that they can't do in the Tahoe? That's the question, right? Because if we're parking those assets, that's my question.
Yeah, Lieutenant Rice can get into that, but I will say they can do things that, they increase productivity on certain areas where we have a higher density for problems, traffic. They can get in and out a lot quicker.
Okay.
They can do a lot of those things, but Yvette can expound on that a little bit.
So the main thing is the maneuverability. And I will tell you that there have been a number of times that I've been in Provo Canyon specifically, and I will tell you, it makes me smile when I see them driving up and down the walking paths, the trails, because you can't take our vehicles on those trails. But we have reports of people exposing themselves to citizens all the time. We know that's a huge issue in Provo Canyon specifically. And we see our motorcycle guys patrolling up and down those trails because they know that's a problem. The other thing is, when you get in areas where maybe you have 2 lanes and there's a lot of traffic, it's a lot easier for a motorcycle to flip out and deal with traffic issues than it is for a big Tahoe or another full-sized patrolling type of truck. So a lot of times the motorcycles work in concert with our patrol people that are in those other types of large vehicles. And maybe the large vehicles will be stationary, running radar or watching for things, they're radioing to each other. And then we have our motorcycles strategically placed so that they can quickly get out in traffic and pull people over.
Okay. How many
Maneuverability
motorcycles
is
do we
big.
have?
Pardon me?
How many motorcycles do we have?
We have 3.
That's it? Just
We
the
only
3?
have 3. We have 2 that were obtained via a grant, 1 as a result of a private donation.
So is the grant still available?
No, it was a one-time grant.
No, it was a
one-time
one-time grant.
From
Mhm.
who?
That I do not know. That was while I was out of patrol for a while.
All 3 of them?
So none, all donated.
All private donations, all 3 of them?
They were not all private donations.
No?
State Highway Patrol grant.
And we only have 3.
We only have 3, and we've had a difficult time maintaining them. There's a lot of downtime now. We've experienced this past year. So it's really difficult to get them out and use them the way that they should be used. And we have citizens who, when they see our motorcycles out in force working an area, they will call into us. You can ask Lieutenant Hodson. We get phone calls about how awesome it is to see the motorcycles out dealing with traffic issues that they know that our big vehicles can't get out and encounter very quickly.
So my only question is we've talked about this, at least for 2 years. I'm sure it was well beyond my years, but, we had a potential plan in place to put these on a leasing program with a one-time expense with basically not a very much to replace cost. Whatever happened to that?
That was the one in Salt Lake County, do you know?
I don't know, that was also before he came back to patrol, I think.
Well, no, I'm talking, yeah, last year we had gone to one of the dealers and worked out a lease buyback program on a 2 or 3 year turnover.
Right.
That's what this would be, basically, is we'd buy those, through a lease option every 2 years, would come back. It
Yeah,
would
but
go
that's-
either way.
But that's different, cause what you're saying is it would be 26.2, and that could be what that number showed, is that every 2 years we were supposed to spend 26,000. So does that mean if we did that program, next year there would be zero cost because it would be 100% contained in maintenance? You see what I'm saying?
Yes, yes. In this,
So in other
these-
words, it's $13,000 roughly every year to run motorcycles for 3 motorcycles. That's what I'm trying to get at
Yeah,
here.
I remember that last year there was, I think Sergeant Christensen had pulled up the whole program and made
Yes.
a document on that as far as the lease. So I know that option is there. To whether this rolls into that, we'll need to research that a little bit
Yeah,
more.
we need to get
but-
those details again, especially when you read the 2 asterisks, if we want to look at that, because it is such a specialized, I mean, even using Public Works own words, they can't take care of everything, because if we start buying ones and twosies of stuff we don't have, then we don't know it, so we need to have that documentation and look at that again.
Yeah, we'll get that back, but I do recall that lease option through that Salt Lake Harley
Salt Lake
dealership.
Harley.
There's still an ongoing cost because
I know there is, I just can't remember what it was, and that's,
it's pretty similar, because I looked at that as well as we were looking at this process. It's almost an identical amount.
We can get that though, bring that back. It
Yeah.
is from, it is from the Salt Lake Harley.
okay.
Number 12 there, I'm gonna go back to Lieutenant Prashant after talking about the deep water and the rough water, about the rigid hull inflatable boat.
I have inflatable inner tubes for you.
Water wings.
Lieutenant Prashant, Emergency Services. So this boat, the state parks boats, again, I mentioned the 24 and 27-foot Boston Whalers. The 27-foot gets pulled out usually on a normal year, water year, in July, and the 24 by the first part of August when the water starts getting low. So we don't have a larger boat to get out in the rough water. These rigid hull inflatables, we've been talking about a couple years, trying to look for surplus, safe boat or something like that. We've even bid on one. But even with that, it would cost 40 to 50,000 just to put the engines on a surplus boat. So we've been looking for options.
Which we did put in a couple bids last year.
Yes, yes, yes. So we've been looking around different options, different products out there, you know, some of my exposures to some military stuff as well. And some agencies there on the coast, and we found a product, a rib boat that we can get for around $70,000. That would be a lot less than the $150,000 Boston Whaler. The draft is a lot less, and like an 18-inch draft. And they do really well cutting through rough water in the deep. And then they have those inflatable cells that take a lot of the force to stabilize the boat. And where our other boat was unreliable, and then that's why we surplused it. So with that, we still have that surplus sitting out there.
Unreliable, that's an understatement. A boat that just keeps flipping upside down, it's a little more than
Well,
unreliable.
more sideways. But I think this is our gap of our service, our abilities to be out there in rough water, that we can bring a patient on board that's not ambulatory. or that's,
I'm more interested in this that you guys put, potentially with the credit, form or from surplus items and a grant, we could get the cost down to 19,000. So why aren't we looking at that?
well, we have other funds. Originally, I was looking at potentially committed, some matching or more, $40,000 in some grant monies from the state or the federal. But that may be down to more 30, but, if I'm looking for 40,
Well, I didn't make up the 19.
right?
You guys
and
typed
That's
it.
the math.
No, it's I just literally read it. That's what
Right.
I'm saying. So why can't we do the 19,000?
Well, it would be 19 plus your 14 that we already have
In the
from
credit.
surplus.
Do we
to
have
credit.
that, Dean? Do you see that 14 and that
So that would-
5? Do you
That would bring it up to, closer to 35.
see that as credits? Do we have that in the? Okay, keep going.
And then the grant on top of that. But the grants probably lessened, I'm talking to Sergeant Quitner, and he's come down from his projected available funds to do that project, So that's always a constant changing depending on what needs come up and things happen, but very doable, depending on, the lights or put a radio, things like that, so those costs can be done down the line, but I think it's a very reasonable amount for that capability, and we're gonna go and
What's the
test
lifetime?
one. Lifespan on one of those boats?
Yeah, so I guess the difference is to me, new versus surplus, right? Auction.
Right.
Let's say you buy a 2010.
The cost is gonna be the engine, to replace the engine, so if you get something generally you're gonna need a new engine. And so that's going down the line, that's you're gonna be replacing is more the engine.
Which is roughly what, and how much life cycle? I have no idea, I'm not a boat guy.
I would say you're gonna put a life on that to 10 to 15 years on the amount of use.
Number of hours.
Okay.
So,
A 150 engine generally runs around $15,000 to $20,000,
Yeah.
depending on the brand.
Okay.
so.
Okay.
So do you see that, Dean? Have you?
When the vehicles were disposed of, there were credits for that amount,
The
whether,
14 and the 5?
There was a separate surplus as well of one of our hovercraft that I think it was
That's
almost
the 5, I believe, isn't it?
almost $5,000
Right.
that you could add to that as well that we hadn't captured. But that just goes in the general fund.
I guess what we're saying is that the 40,000 would be the worst-case scenario if we didn't get any other additional funding.
No, we need 35, 40,000, and then we could make do with that,
With the additional,
with
Revenue.
other resources, whether it be division, my budget versus grants or other
Well-
donations.
Are you taking into account the 14 and the 5? Is that
Yes, well,
as part of it, or is that?
total, 40 total,
We're
as a
including the-
commitment from the budget that's gonna be dedicated towards that
So
project.
21,000 is the ask with the credits.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that's,
That's that's what I was trying to get to.
just to be clear though, the hover boat was sold in 2015, so that's not gonna be an offset credit in 2018.
Well, it's not direct, but
Right,
yes.
so in their budget would actually have to be the $40,000.
Yes.
okay.
Well, I know at least one person is watching this on YouTube. I just gotta. To lease those bikes a year ago, the lease was,
I hope he's wearing short sleeves, Cole.
yeah,
Yeah, I know it's Cole.
3,600 per year to lease per bike. So I'll forward out that.
But that included all the maintenance too, done by them.
I'd have
Per
to,
bike,
I'll forward this to
3,600
you.
per
Yeah.
bike.
See, so that
Significantly different.
Yes, see, because that's the conversation I remember, which means if we did that with the buy-in credit that they'd give us on this, the first year, it cost us nothing. So if we did this in 2018, what we'd get on the credit, it was roughly a wash, and then we'd only pay the ongoing costs.
Yeah, I'll get you an updated version of that from the dealer,
Yes.
and so we can have a little
Yes,
bit of
please.
better info on that.
Sooner the better, obviously.
All right, number 13 is just a request, we've talked about this before, for pit vehicles. The state stopped allowing entities to use those at the EVO range. These are vehicles that we would outfit two leftover from the road shops that would fit the needs, just cars. And the $6,000 would be a request to outfit them structurally with bumpers, metal, iron bumpers, things to hit with the other, to have that pit training. We perform pit training every other year, and this is obviously to stop fleeing felons, driving the wrong side of
So-
the road, things like that.
Having sold cars for a little time, people come in dealerships, basically, cars that, I call them 16-year-old cars, but they're not really. They buy them for $300 to $500. So the question is why don't we buy a few of those cars rather than retain them, because we get more out of the auction? Why haven't we ever looked at going to a dealership and saying, hey, when you get in some of these older cars, we're more than willing to standing offer $300 or $400, right? And buy them and then outfit them that way. Would that be a potential savings to you at all?
It may be, just haven't looked at that option. We know, we need to have vehicles that would work, rear-wheel drive vehicles that wouldn't cause extensive maintenance on the front-wheel drive vehicle. So some of those things we have to look at as far as an ideal type of older vehicle.
Part of the issue on training those, that the vehicles have to match the type of driving, so that they get the feel of how that vehicle interacts with the forces they're putting on it. In other words, you can't buy a Yugo, if you could find one, and use that for driving the pit maneuvers, and then transfer that training over to a full-size Yukon or something like that. So they have to be similar in size and weight so that the training is valid. And there may be out there though,
Yeah.
again, because they take a lot of punishment.
Okay.
14, I broke it down into two separate divisions, the judicial division and the investigation for forensic technicians. They're requesting 6 portable radios for the forensic technicians, be able to communicate out on crime scenes with officers, with each other, if it's an expanded area, be able to coordinate getting people in to remove evidence. They just don't have the ability to communicate other than their phones, and if they're in an area where they have no service up a crime scene up the canyon, things like that, we need them to be able to communicate not only with each other but with us as well, see if they have any other needs coming in or out of a scene. The other 3 would be for replacing, as we continue to replace the law clerk bailiffs with bailiffs as we exit out of that program. These bailiffs will need radios. Obviously, we'll try to find existing funds to buy a few of those, but those will be needed for officer safety, for inside the courts, out when they're out transporting back and forth inmates, juveniles.
So the sheriff came and explained radios to me on Friday a little bit where that come, and I understand that. I still struggle with why you guys have this in your budget when Public Works has asked for $1 million and whatever in there. And I know the answer because every year the last couple of years, Public Works told you guys to put it in your budget. But I just don't understand for the commission or for Deneen, why we have them in both. Why Public Works is over radios and then they tell them to put them in there. That's what I'm not understanding. So, anyway, side note on that.
I can't answer that either.
No, and I don't expect you to. I just, from a budget, that's what I'm saying. It seems like we're double paying, and since they're asking you for it, then all of a sudden they have this excess funds in their budget, and it's like, what in the heck is going on here?
Yeah, and I think that probably needs to be looked at further, because part of the lease amount that they're paying, it specifically said that covers all maintenance, repair, and replacement of
That's
user
right.
equipment. So if you're paying the lease, you shouldn't have to pay for the
That's right, but 2
radios.
years ago, they were supposed to have a whole bunch replaced, And Public Works screwed up and said, well, we don't have them. And then they told the sheriff, you have to put them in your budget. And then when I called, they said, well, yeah, we don't have them. Well, that's too bad. You spent the money somewhere. So it's not the sheriff's responsibility to do that when they're charged the lease, and that's why I say.
Right, and that's why it probably needs to be looked at further.
Yeah, I don't think that should be even a request in yours. I think that should be,
Now,
anyway.
of course, new radios.
Yes,
you
additional
understand,
people,
because
that's different.
First-time purchase.
But that still gets added to your lease rate.
Right.
And so the request would be, if we're getting 3 new people, we need 900 more, or whatever the number is, right? And, which is a far cry from $33,000.
Yeah.
So, anyway, okay.
15 is along those same lines. 5 vehicles within the judicial division are not equipped with the mobile radios, which becomes a little bit unreliable if they just have the portables hooked up when they're up traveling around. The batteries on the portables may go out if that's the only option they have. I'm of the opinion that if we have a vehicle assigned to it, they ought to have these mobile radios in them just for safety, be able to communicate. For example, last week, one of our judicial deputies is involved in a pursuit on the armed robbery suspects out of Sanpete County. They had rifles. The deputy trying to pursue until he can get help coming, had his portable radio gone out. Could have been a mess for trying to get resources in to help locate those things. So we're just trying to obtain some funding to get mobile radios within those vehicles, and there's 5 of them that we've identified. 16, I'm gonna have to refer back to Lieutenant Prashon on the capitalization shortage to replace a vehicle. He's got all the knowledge related to vehicles from 1995, whenever that one was.
Back several years ago, Lieutenant Prashon, Emergency Services Division. Several years ago, 2 vehicles were obtained via grant. And so we had probably 7 years use on one vehicle, and now it will be 8 years use on another vehicle.
But you did capitalize these ones.
They were not capitalized.
Oh, okay.
Back in the day, the thought by the commission was if they were grant funded, that they would not capitalize them. And that was the way that was gone forward for many years. And then we
'Cause if they-
decided
if
that
they
was
went
not a
away,
good idea.
they go away.
Philosophy.
That's right.
Yeah.
When they outuse their usefulness.
So,
Problem is though, we were using grants to fulfill priority needs based on the savings. So they weren't really vehicles that were not necessary. They were folded into an ongoing program with a one-time purchase grant money, with the hope that someday they would either be capitalized or replaced by another grant. But those days, in the 6, 7, 8 years ago, the federal grants have just dried up, something fierce.
I
still,
think this, sorry, I hate to interrupt, but I already think this request is in your 2018 budget, because the motor pool lease reflected the replacement of vehicle
Yes.
number
Yes, they have.
1194.
yes.
Okay.
So then,
So this may be duplicate then?
that's
Hopefully.
what
Well,
it appears
make-
like to me.
This goes back to my other comment. Last year, they told you have to put this in here, and you don't.
Right.
Because again, you're charged those intergovernmental leases or rates.
Well,
Well, I think
well,
that
to be
makes-
fair, no, they would have to put it in there because it's the same as a radio that you're getting for the first time. If you didn't have a vehicle that was recapitalized, the point that I'm making is it appears like it's already in the lease amount that was calculated
see.
for you. Cause
Okay.
it shows 1194 being replaced at a cost of 41,470 and sorry, it's
Yes.
hard for me to read, a credit of 25,969, which I think is from a different
the-
vehicle, and
No,
then,
they were from the original 2 vehicles that they replaced. We retained the capitalization for those, but they weren't, it was a long time ago.
yeah.
And plus, they weren't diesel.
So we
engines.
had capitalized vehicles that we replaced with grant vehicles.
Yes, and we retained the capitalization. so that
There's the
when-
short. So had we just taken a few $100s every year out of capitalizing
Yes.
those, not even at a full replacement cost,
Just because
and
of-
kept up with that inflationary like 3%, we'd have probably been close on this one.
Right,
Right.
right.
So the difference of 15,500 though is already in your lease amount of 152,000.
Okay,
Which,
so-
so if you entered a lease amount of 152 in your 2018 budget, then I'm guessing that should already
That
be
should be.
in
And
your
that makes
budget.
sense of what maybe happened
In other
before.
words, you've struck oil, sit down.
Yeah.
For clarification, the time before, that 15 was in there and they didn't use it because maybe it was in they already put it in, like you said, this time.
Who
Is
should
that
we
what you're
check
saying?
with just to verify that? Should it go back to the road shops and?
Right, and I'd give them a copy of your lease and just say, just wanna make sure that that
We'll follow
replacement
up on
is.
that.
And you could send them the link for this video.
Yes. Yeah, they're probably watching.
They're
So-
not, but they are. That's why the windshields aren't getting replaced today.
17 would be to cover additional costs for polygraph psychological services, the administration division. There's a little breakout of the requested funds there. 2,000 range special department for the 4,800 account. It was cut from 6,000 down to 4,000 2 years ago. This is the next most important account for the firearms, due to all the safety equipment being purchased from it. And then the next one, 6,000, 3,000 apiece for total, but for the polygraph and psychological services that we outsource for background checks, for potential new hires. 1,000,
So, then why didn't you put that in your? Trying to go back to that background check.
the two positions.
Yeah, so if we give you the two positions, or one position, that's not encumbered in that?
Well, you're right, going back into that, and I grouped these all together for that, but we could take 2,500 out of that, because those, associated with that position in that request was $2,500 for overtime for that, for each position.
Okay. So this is really, okay.
And then 1,000, for the 2,500 account to replace, for the replacement of steel targets. After wear and tear on those things, they chip, they break down, sitting in the winter. If they're not in the storage, getting wet, things break down that way. And also to help with the maintenance cost of the Polaris Ranger. And then 1,000 for the Rad Kid systems taught by the sheriff's office. Those programs continue to grow. We keep getting them full. It's expanding that way a little bit. So we're asking for those additional funds to have new instructors certified. 18 goes to a request for upgrading the evidence custodian position to a senior evidence custodian position. That position does do trains other ones coming in as far as basic functions of the lab and evidence.
Okay, correct. Help me, my brain is all over the place on this one. When we combined this, we had positions, and then we redid the staffing plan to encumber what the practice that you guys wanted. How does this relate to that?
So this is so we have the three forensic technicians.
Okay.
They're the ones that are actually, they're the ones going out processing crime scenes, dealing with latent fingerprints, collecting all that. This evidence custodian primary responsibility is in the facility itself, managing the day-to-day incoming evidence, inventory, processing, bringing that stuff in. So this, as we anticipate that lab to continue to grow, which goes down to number 19, is a request for an additional evidence custodian. And in this position, the upgrade of that would be just to help kind of oversee and work with that as it kind of moves up forward with there. The lab, as we've talked about, and I think as you've been out to visit that, the evidence facility is almost near max capacity. We need to drastically look at how we're going to alleviate that. Adding this position that we're requesting would help dispose of some of that evidence as well in a more timely manner, the way it all comes in at rapid pace there.
Am I not seeing the green sheet for that position, Denise? Oh, never mind, I found it, it's just on a different sheet, sorry.
So 18 and 19 are tied together is what you're saying.
Yeah,
on
18, we're asking for an upgrade of our current position to kind of a senior
Upgrade
type
and then
level
fill the-
and bringing in another one at an entry level.
So, okay, you'll have to help me on this one. Wireless access and cell phone usage for an evidence custodian that's inside a building where there's a landline. Why would that be necessary?
Sometimes our evidence custodian also goes out to scenes to pick up, bring evidence back and forth and assist with photographs, assist with some of those things out on scene, so that's probably why you're seeing that in there.
They need a vehicle. There's not, you guys don't just have office vehicles that are out there that can be used. Vehicle lease of 8,000, because when you say they go out, again, I understand that, but you're adding because they're in the building. 90% of their work's gonna be in this building. 10% of the time may be out, right?
For those evidence custodians, you're probably maybe 80-20. I see more accurate. They do come out. Now, as we've got that third forensic technician, that'll kind of help potentially reduce that. A vehicle, obviously, between the two, we could share one. We could look at, doing those things. If the position was approved and we were able to get that with the two evidence custodians, we maybe have that. The problem is, like with the on-call, if they rotate in call, on-call, everything else. But coming out to a crime scene
Okay,
to assist.
so this is another part that I just need help understanding. So if they're on call, I get that the scene is what the scene is, and, time is somewhat of the essence, right? But I guess my question is it not feasible for somebody on call to drive to the sheriff's department, down to Spanish Fork to the SO, and then go pick up whatever they need and go? Because if they're on call, are they taking everything they're gonna need anyway?
Well, the issue you have is some of the, obviously the equipment they have in their vehicle to be able to respond in a timely manner. They would come back to pick up the Faro machine, but these vehicles need to be able to have the capacity to hold that type of equipment. And each one of them, is Doug here yet, Eric? Or you can come up and help with this one as well.
I'm not saying it's not necessary, but that's my point, is
Yeah.
they're already going back to the SO to pick up some of that equipment. So that in my mind says, okay, I don't need to have an on-call vehicle already there. It can stay at the county facility, ready to go, fully loaded, ready to go. But they have to drive there anyway, so why can't they just drive from their home?
When you live in the north end of Utah County, up Lehigh.
But they still
Eagle
have to
Mountain,
drive to Spanish Fork anyway.
Well, depending on where the crime scene is, if it's out.
Yeah, but if they have
it's
to go
out
pick
there.
up the Faro machine, that's what I thought I heard you say.
Well, if that's needed, obviously, it's not needed every time, but there's some equipment
Okay.
they may have to come pick back up.
Okay.
If that's the case, then that ideally would be fine. In other cases, it becomes a time issue as well, getting there. The longer a detective has to wait, longer a patrol has to wait at a crime scene for them to come in, maybe delaying traffic or business operations, depending on where it is. But Eric
Okay.
can kind of follow up with that too.
To address the Faro machine, that isn't just used at crime scenes, so you have other people use it. Our traffic accident investigation team needs that, so sometimes they'll go to Spanish Fork to pick up that specific tool. But our goal to be a mobile forensic unit, a unit that can respond to any crime scene anywhere in the county, any city in the county, they have to have vehicles with all of their equipment needed to process a crime scene. Now, when you get to a crime scene, you gotta break it down also, not just your forensic technicians, you have a property custodial. That's what we're looking
Right.
at upgrading. So when you process the evidence, you gotta collect it and bag it. It goes to the custodian, and she needs to put it in the computer, put it in her little, or inside the facility there, she can categorize it, putting it in an area that it can be found quickly. But when you talk about evidence and processing evidence, we have several cases that we can display to you or show you that say, if we don't collect the evidence in a timely manner, we lose that evidence. Some of our homicide cases, for instance, one up Springville Canyon, where we had to cover up some footprints with some manila envelopes because it was snowing so hard. So we needed to process the scene. That has to be done in a timely manner. That's why we need that rapid response.
Okay, so of your evidence custodians, how many of them live in the north end of the county?
We just have one evidence custodial. It's Kelly. She doesn't even live she's moving into the county now. She's building a house in Spanish Fork.
Okay,
So,
not helping me get to where we need to have this car parked in her garage. That's what I'm saying, if she's moving to Spanish Fork. So we always have to defend when people will say that to us. So again, I'm not talking about necessarily the evidence custodian in general. I'm talking about why they need certain aspects, because I have to be accountable for every dime of this job.
Sure.
I know the job's useful, I know it's needed, but I'm having a hard time understanding why a cell phone, permanent cell phone, is allocated, and why we would have a vehicle allowance on somebody that may or may not be called out 80 to 20% of the time. Why we can't have a reimbursement for some cell phone usage. Again, I'm not asking for somebody to use their own personal equipment, but why we have to have this ongoing expense, and we're not potentially looking at, okay, why don't we have a vehicle that's locked up in storage ready to go? Because I guess part of it is if it's so time sensitive that they have to go back or use the Faro machine or whatever, they're going there anyway, right? She lives in Spanish Fork. It's
Another,
moot point.
yeah, another, being how she does live in Spanish Fork, you know, myself have called her probably a dozen times within the last 2 years or last year to have her come down to the lab to open it for us, to bring vehicles or whatever to get into it. Calling her to have that facilitated, because she does live fairly close where the other ones don't. To have that ability that she can respond and do those is essential. I can't get in there.
Right.
We have
No, and I
very
understand all
restricted
that.
people there. So that's another reason why we think it's imperative that they do have that ability and those communications.
She doesn't have that ability unless she has a Utah County Sheriff marked vehicle.
No, it's not a marked vehicle. These are unmarked vehicles.
Okay, so she doesn't have that ability if she has a Utah County possessed car? That's my question, right?
She
If
does.
Sheriff
have-
Tracy forgets his keys, he's calling his admin and saying, I need you to open up my office, get here, right? She's gonna do that in her own personal vehicle as she goes to work. That's what I'm trying to understand. I understand why we need evidence vans or whatever with all the equipment. I'm not understanding why this person, it's the same argument I have with the attorneys. Why they all think they need trucks and 5 trailers because they only ever go to one crime scene at a time. But yet they all think they have to need it. It's the same concept to me here. I get that it's essential, but again, if they live right by Spanish Fork and they're gonna go get it, I don't understand that.
Well, I think in Kelly's specific, again, I'm not even exactly sure. I think she's building a house. Kelly is our evidence.
No, I understand, but so this is an unmarked car, so time is of the essence. If it's so crucial, literally every minute, why aren't they trained and why don't we go code 3 and put lights on? You know what I'm saying? Like 1 or 2 minutes. That's the disconnect for me. To me, I can save $10,000 right off this job by having a vehicle parked there that I'm not, have that increased liability. Because the other part of my concern is all of this expensive equipment not contained at the sheriff's office by a non-sworn officer.
I don't think, we can go, both ways that way and discuss that. Having, whether the vehicle's parked, whether it's parked at the evidence facility or whether it's parked at her residence, it's been more efficient the way it's been working. And that's why the request has been made. But, that's something we can look at as far as efficiency, and regardless, we still need that vehicle for that position to have her be able to perform her duties. Go ahead, Eric, stay here for number 20. These are just equipment items our evidence facility is in need of due to, go ahead, Eric, you can explain.
So as we create this lab or get this lab up and running, there are several items that Doug Squire and his team need to use in order to collect different types of evidence. They've made the request for the DNA vacuum machine. We've made that request several times over the years. I think as we look at some of the cases that have happened around the county here recently, some cases that have been lost for either technical reasons or lack of evidence, that's something we're trying to overcome. We're trying to get the proper equipment so we can collect all the evidence, all the forensic evidence we need at a crime scene. Or if we bring the evidence into the lab, they can collect it at the lab. In that case, we're talking about our DNA vacuum machine. We also have a forensic light source laser. We have a laser. It broke many years ago. We just haven't had the funding to fix it. We're trying to get a new laser.
What does it do?
So a laser sends out an alternate light source. So it's able to pick up on evidence that you with the naked eye can't see. And there's different spectrums of lights, and you may hold a filter in front of a light system, and it's gonna pick up a fingerprint, it's gonna pick up DNA evidence, things that you just can't find without it. And,
Blood that's on the wall that's been washed off that you can't see with the naked eye, this, you can put a certain filter on there and see. Same thing with like fingerprints.
Along those items, you have a digital fingerprint examination station. As our lab grows, again, we collect fingerprints a lot, and processing a fingerprint takes quite a bit of time. And so we're trying to get another station set up so we can get more technicians working on the multiple fingerprints that we have coming in. And then the last item is that fuming station. We have a fuming station.
Do
It's
you
getting
have the
old.
staff, if that was given already, to have a second station?
We have the staff now.
The
with
staff, so if we gave you this equipment, it's not additional staff needed.
No,
It's
no.
just for more efficiencies, and in some cases, efficiencies we've lost because we haven't replaced them.
That's correct. So we've picked up that third evidence technician position, but we only have one station, and it's an older fingerprint examination station, so we're trying to get a new one with better technology.
I'd also add here, the part of the issue too is that the state is continuing to reduce its availability for these types of, used to just send everything to the state crime lab. And they would perform these tests and send you back reports. And then they'd come down and testify. But that's drying up. They are reluctant to do that. They're being overwhelmed. The legislature is not in the state's lab across the board, whether it's firearms examinations or whatever. They have not kept up with the need that would be coming in from these different agencies across the state. So agencies are continually, especially based on the need for prosecution and timeliness to get this to the courts. The judges have been requiring shorter and shorter times for these hearings to occur. And without like the drug analysis to say that this is a drug versus just baby powder, we can't go forward with the next appearance with the county attorney. So these things are increasingly becoming more important to do in-house so that we can get the timely return so the justice, and not the justice, but the justice system can go forward with the county attorney making the complaints to the courts and getting the next hearings set up. And it's just not keeping up. So this is across the state. We're required to do more of this in-house just for our own survival and ability to prosecute a clean case.
Okay.
'21 is an Everbridge shortage for the on-call management system. The program's been added, which has greatly increased the effectiveness of our SAR callouts, investigative callouts, training callouts for our tactical team. So that's just a $1,200 request to keep that management program moving forward.
Is that $1,200 short across the board? Because I thought that we were gonna increase so that everyone picked up
No,
a
it's
portion
not.
of it. Is it just ours? Just our portion of the
Just
shortage?
our portion.
So how much are we short then,
It was 1,200, with the actual cost is.
overall?
This is something only we use. This isn't one that the cities use, this portion.
Actual cost is a little more, but we had some overage in what we budgeted for that, and our county's cost has gone down because of the participation, so I think half of the actual cost of that program is covered by the surplus on that, so, but the gap is $1,200 going forward for the annual cost.
What part of this is that we use, that you're stating, Commissioner?
The search and rescue and their investigations calls, they just use that
For SWAT,
inside the
search and rescue,
department.
yeah. The on-call management program,
Yeah, this
an added
portion of the program that they've added, that
application, yeah.
they're asking for is something only used internally.
Just for the
So it's
county
just
attorney.
ours then?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So our pilot, Dave Bennett, part-time pilot, we pay him $25 an hour, which is a pretty good deal for a pilot.
Yes, it is.
He loves it, and he's great. We've been trying to recruit other pilots, other part-time pilots. Perfect model would be to get other experienced pilots, high-time pilots, high-time hours, to come and work for us and have 2 or 3 at least that we can pull from, because one pilot's not gonna be in town all the time, because he's got another job. So we need, and there's a couple that we brought in, and then when they find out how much we pay them, then it's not worth my time. So we're trying to bring his up to what's reasonable, especially when his title should be the chief pilot or chief maintenance officer, at $40 an hour, and then the other civilian pilots, because he's sworn, at $30 an hour. So that's just the additional cost next year to do that, potentially. So that's our request on
Have a
that.
sworn pilot?
We have a sworn pilot right now, yes. He's a part-time deputy that works for our division, just like Deputy Curtis. So we use him for other things other than just the pilot as well.
Extraditions are the bigger thing. I mean, you don't need
Yeah.
a sworn person necessary to fly SAR,
Right.
but for extraditions, you want that extra sworn individual in there when you're transporting prisoners.
So can you do two rates for the same person? So when he's performing that duty, he gets a certain hour and
Sworn deputy's a sworn
I think the
deputy, right?
significant wage difference is not for the sworn part of it, it's more for the chief pilot, the experience and the retention ability there to, I've compared, wages with DPS, with their aviation programs as well as Lifeline.
they
things
pay
like that.
40?
They pay, I'd have to look at the numbers I sent, we're doing separate through personnel, but around $40 an hour.
Okay.
So,
Get through the home stretch here. 23, just as a request, and this can be communicated with repairs to the road at the Thistle Range. This may be a public works issue, we just wanted to kind of bring it up. The large cracks, holes beginning to form in the roadways up there, prevention of vehicle damage, et cetera. So that's a request, but more of a talking point. We'll get with Public Works on that one as
Yeah,
well.
because you're not gonna be the sponsor on this, are you, to make sure that it gets done?
Well, obviously, we'll push to get it done, but as far as responsible for who's responsible for paying for it,
Are we talking from the gate, where the gate's closed back, or from the road through the gate all the way back?
I'm not sure who owns that road outside the gate. Well, it's county.
It's the county.
So,
That was a land swap that was done many, many years ago.
Right, but I'm
when-
talking
after
for the
Thistle.
road repair.
Right, I don't know
You're
which part
talking
they're
the
looking
entire
at.
stretch off of,
Yeah, it could be, I
off
don't
the
know.
highway.
I know, we know specifically what's inside the gate, that's what our biggest concern is, but you're right, there are condition issues that go all the way back out
What-
to 89,
Yeah, there's a couple
or
big
US
holes.
6, it's 89.
When was the last time that was
That can all
done?
be repaired for $25,000?
that was an estimate Lieutenant Higley had submitted. I'm not sure. I know there's a lot of material that apparently is up there that's been told to the county they can utilize it. So I'm not sure where exactly. And he had an interview, a background to get done today, so he couldn't be here. But I'll follow up with this and get you some more information.
Yeah, I'd probably reach out to even like, as far as an overlay, maybe like even a Geneva Rock can get a cost, because if it's already cracking, if you watch Public Works, you'll learn you don't want to chip seal it anyway, because you're just buying a year. So
The only good part of that
if we're
is
gonna
it's
chip
not
seal
a
it, we might
super
as well
high
mill it up
use.
and gravel it.
It's not used like it is like a regular street,
Right.
So that's one thing that helps us in that regard, that it's not a high volume traffic.
Well, actually, it hurts
But
you.
hurts,
It actually
yeah.
hurts you on asphalt for a paved
Really?
surface if you don't have enough traffic on it. The oil and it actually
Really?
can cause more, which is why we lose our trails up the canyon more, because there's not enough heavyweight traffic on them. There is a equation for it.
Never mind.
24 is a cell phone forensic tool. It's a software application that runs through a Windows operating system to extract the high-quality data in less time than some of the other tools that we currently
So if we gave you that and
use.
didn't do the Cellbrite training, would it matter?
Yeah. You'd probably rather have the Cellbrite training first, but. 25 and 26, this goes down to some positions for patrol. The first one would be a Deputy 3 ACO position that we lost years ago. It would enable us to have an ACO per team. We're currently running a team without, so the rest of the animal control deputies are adjusting their times to basically work daytime where a higher call volume is. This would put us back to where we'd have an animal control deputy out with each team to take care of those calls. and available the other resources to go take.
There
other
really that
calls
much
there.
need in animal control?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, being the county, we are consistently, animal calls are one of our higher
Okay.
call volumes. 26 would be a request to, an ongoing request to add another deputy to each team. We've been this way for many years. We feel like adding one guy per team will help manage the call volume, help manage adjusting for time off, for vacation time, backup for deputies that are out there.
Okay,
You know,
so
this-
here's my question to you.
Sure.
And this is what I do to every department. If you were to get this, how much can I reduce your overtime by?
That would be kind of it's such a fluid environment. And that's the hard thing with public safety is we don't know what we're going to face day to day. So sometimes it may benefit, it may help it go down. Other times it may be consistent, because of events that occur. If it's a domestic violence, we need two guys out there to cover each other and to help out with that program. So it's an unpredictable environment with that.
Let me take over to Sheriff Tracy. Part of the issue is that there's crime that's not being addressed out there. So if you put 6 additional people on, they still will end up with those same other issues that the 5 that are out there on. When they find another crime near the end of their time, they may be pushed into overtime. But as you know, the numbers of citations and arrests and DUIs have gone down dramatically in 17 from 16. And we're seeing the cumulative effect of having more and more of our time spent on things that have already occurred. We're being dispatched to an already occurred burglary, an already occurred theft, an already occurred assault. So we're running from item to item, cleaning up and basically investigating what has already happened, and we're not preventing what can happen or might happen. And so our proactive abilities have significantly been deterred. When I came here in 2003, I did a manpower needs assessment for just patrol. We needed 20 people in 2003. Over the next 3 or 4 years through 2007, we got 10 of those. Then 2008 hit, which was the big recession. Since then, we have had no other additional persons put on for patrol. The workload since 2008 to 2018, coming 18, has significantly increased based on just population of the county growing. And particularly this year, the additional homeless issues that's being forced upon us from the Salt Lake area. But all those concerns are just swamping our capacity to stop anything and to take crime that we could find and have in the past found based on the ability to do proactive versus reactive, because we are now doing almost exclusively reacting. And that's what's hurting us. So I think public safety overall is hurting. It's been affected, it's been impacted in a negative way that we're not able to keep some of these crimes from happening and taking off the crime that we know still exists because we don't have the manpower to do that. So we have come to a critical junction based on this manpower issue from 2008 to now. And it's just at a breaking point, it really is.
Hey, so, and again, I don't understand the difference between Deputy 1, 2, and 3 as
Right.
much as like I do on the others, because I've never felt like that was mismanaged. But that being said, why can't the addition of, it sounds like if we're adding people, it says 6 Deputy 3s, why can't they be Deputy 1s?
Well, in the world of Deputy 1s and Deputy 3s, the certifications are the same. I think we've gone over this before a couple years ago. They're the same. They're all LEO sworn officers as far as Deputy 1s. You know, the difference really manifests itself in what we have in the jail, where we have certified people that are certified for corrections and special functions, but not LEO. But it's the basis of where they're stationed, as far as in mostly civil, where we have the Deputy 1s, and Deputy 3s are full-time patrol people. I don't know what the cost significance difference is. It's usually manifested more in just the equipment needed more than just the manpower
Well, in
cost per hour.
salaries from well, if you go from step one of a one.
That's
to-
true.
To
the
the
range,
end,
you're talking
it's a
about the
big
range.
difference,
You're
but
talking about the
it's-
range, yes. Well, and again, the issue of what we expect them to do and the training needed to be self-sufficient on arrest issues and making decisions on law inside of a courtroom or the facility security apparatus of a court building versus a guy who's out in the middle of nowhere on his own on the road is significant for liability issues.
And that's what you label
Yeah,
as a
let me-
3.
yes.
Okay.
I happen to listen to your questioning for the attorneys, the attorney 1, 2, 3, 4s.
Yeah, where it's
And-
just a
and-
year
and I-
thing.
And I listened to that. The difference that we have is job description. A deputy 1, deputy 2, correction specialist 1, correction specialist 2 have completely different job descriptions as a deputy 3. So for us, it's not everybody's not going to be a deputy 3 where, as you were
Just
mentioning.
because they work for 12 years doesn't make
Correct.
them a 3.
That's exactly right. They're deputy 2s because of their assignment, and that's all they'll be until they move into patrol. Yeah, when they transfer and then they go, when they test, they have to test for patrol. As a deputy or a correction specialist 2 has to test for patrol just as anybody else does. It's a testing promotion thing, so.
Then they assume the new job description, like you said, is
Right.
not doing things at the court with a lesser need for independence.
Okay, so this only says deputy 3 because that's the title we've given it rather than a patrol deputy. Okay.
Correct.
You could take the three
Yeah.
off and say patrol deputy.
It's a patrol deputy, it's that job function.
Okay.
That we're trying to fill the need of the job description. And that's where we differ. All of our deputies will never become all deputy 3s. That's
Okay.
not, that, like was discussed with the attorney 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
That
Well,
won't happen with our
It was
department.
explained to him, my feelings. It wasn't discussed.
Also, this is an additional motorcycle as well, so that would take us to 4, right? Is that,
Yeah, we would like to have, you know, the ability to have 2x2,
So-
so 4 together with that.
So my only problem that you did ask for this last year, so I know the need's getting there, but from a management standpoint for you, this is my problem. The overtime question, I don't expect a necessary number, but I just fundamentally can never wrap my head around the business person in me, not the law enforcement. I'm not a law enforcement officer. But I don't understand how if a commission gives you additional staff members, how overtime cannot be reduced. It's hard to spend $1 million in one pot and not see a savings elsewhere. That doesn't compute in my world. So I need help
Yeah.
from you guys getting there because
Come on, there you go. Part of it is again, the overtime for what it's expended is many times for things that are associated with the actual business that the individual is doing within the realm of his regular time. So in other words, when we do overtime for another project, let's say it's off-duty time or something where, like, they say the county fair, and we need people to go do that. Well, there's still the component that has to be out on the street.
Right.
And what we're saying is, those don't correlate to a reduction in overtime for the things that are occurring outside of that work period, because the people who are doing the work already still incur certain amount of overtimes just based on the nature of the work when they have a last-minute DUI or a last-minute burglary that they're assigned to, and they can't just transfer that off to the next crew.
sure. So here's my concern though.
Yeah.
The canyon team goes and gets called. So the whole canyon team goes because that's what they're supposed to do, right? Problem is if I add one, I've increased my costs. And again, doing their duty, they go get overtime. I've now not only increased my baseline 1,100, but now I've increased my overtime costs. That's the part that doesn't correlate for me.
Understand, but I guess you have to look at in what do you get for that? The production of the numbers of arrests, the ability to become more proactive rather than just reactive in the crime management of what they're trying to do as their job. Those are what are being paid for not necessarily just the reduction of an overtime.
Okay, so taking that mindset, you alluded, they're down, we're down in certain numbers because of
Right.
staffing plan, and I get that.
Vacancies.
Sure, so the question is then, if we gave this to you, what can we expect in those numbers, right? What does adding that person, so as far as citations or certain types, what do you believe's there? So for example, if we did this, and let's say the commission grant funded this for 2 years, right? And we try this, and we say, we expect this. So here's our citations, and because of that, we're gonna be here. And we can have those discussions while we're going, and then if it doesn't happen, boom, we cut it, right?
Yes. We don't have a quota system, as you know, for citations. I get it. Let me get some water here. We don't have a quota system, but yes, we would expect that those arrests and those numbers would come back up just based on the fact that we have additional people to handle what they can find and what they see, because
Okay.
we think that that need exists. As a matter of fact, we know it exists. We're not stopping things that are occurring out there because they additionally become the things that we are now reacting to because we didn't get them stopped. So I think you would see an increase in all those across the board, whether it's traffic, whether it's arrests for thefts, for other things that we can determine are occurring or have occurred. Those numbers will go up. The work to do is there.
I think in line with that, what we would see, what we would anticipate seeing is when we're running minimum staffing levels, if we had an extra guy per team, that means you could have a guy or two off without having to bring in somebody for overtime or a 1,000-hour employee to cover a shift. So we would see a little bit of cost savings in those two areas as well with the added manpower out there.
To add to the overtime discussion, we would anticipate, it is really fluid, and you understand that. And Chief Deputy Brower is absolutely correct. We believe that with the additional personnel, additional staffing to each team, that will ultimately impact the need to call in people when we allow a couple people off for vacation, they're gone for sick leave, FMLA, whatever. But with increased proactivity, of course, court attendance will also go up. So that is covered by overtime monies. Driver's license hearings potentially will go up. We would expect that would logically occur as well. But our special teams, you talked about the concern that if the rec team all goes out in mass, and potentially there's a
Like they're
huge-
supposed to,
Yes, they're supposed to.
yeah.
With our specialty teams, specifically the rec team and the traffic team, the majority of the overtime that they use is in conjunction with one of our special contracts, either Forest Service or specifically American Fork Canyon Forest Service. We now have the FFSL agreement for patrolling around the lakes. We have distracted driving monies, state DUI monies. The majority of those special teams, their overtime is covered by those special projects, okay? With the exception of court attendance, DL stuff, maybe some special thing that occurs, some special training that we've mandated that they attend. We also require that they manage their time. So they have the latitude of cutting hours,
So.
where our regular teams do not.
So I agree, and thank you for that explanation. However, so this is the disconnect. If the real overtime expense that's not, that I guess is general fund funded, is the court expense, I appreciate that, but those revenues are so down, and I've had a discussion with the judge on why, and I'm not blaming you guys, trust me, I think I know where the answer is, and it's not you guys and it's not the court. But the problem is they're not seeing very many cases anymore. So how come I haven't seen a dip in that overtime?
Because we are having to cover our shortages.
Okay,
That's our big problem right now. We have to cover our
okay,
holes.
so then, and I understand the numbers aren't exact.
Right.
When was the last time you felt like you weren't at a shortage level? So that in essence, what I'm trying to look is, if I go back to 2013,
Yeah.
we felt like we were an optimum level with normal conditions, right? We expect the unexpected in your world, but if I look back at that overtime number, can I, in my mind, say, okay, this is about the general fund contribution or what to expect? And then as certain situations come up, you guys come to the commission and say, hey, this is going on. And we have that dialogue so that we know and we can expect, hey, we're gonna be $60,000 short, or we're gonna, you know, as you guys do when that happens. I'm trying to find that number because I've never understood where that base number is.
As I've been back to patrol for just over a year now, we've had about a 1 month period of time where all of our positions were completely staffed. And it has completely changed after that month. So in the whole last year, we've run consistently with a hole of about 2 to 5 people. So we're continually having to fill a hole. To the extent that it's impacted our proactivity because our special teams, our traffic enforcement team and our recreation team specifically, we've had to reallocate them in order to cover the holes on our
Right.
regular teams.
Right.
I don't think you'll ever
So
find
it's
that
a
number.
big
No, I
I
don't
think it's a
either.
number that you can
I don't know
find.
that we could give you a number, but I do believe you're right that you should expect some reduction in those hours, the 1,000 hours that we're using to fill the holes, because we don't have to take them out of the teams anymore because we have that additional person. We don't have to backfill. I think there would be some reductions there. What they would be, I'm not sure.
Well, and the reason I ask that is because I agree with Commissioner Lee. I don't know that that exact number exists. I know it, I don't believe it does either. But going back to what the commission's asked you guys to do for the last
So you
few
got a
years is,
crystal ball.
right, that's right. But we've always tried to ask you guys to manage to a certain number.
Right.
Because we're trying to guesstimate and give you a number to management and hold you there. And that's why in my
think-
mind, I'm trying to find that level so that
Right.
we can have this understanding that this is just the minimum, right?
It's a balance.
That's
You're trying
right.
to find, where is that balance?
I
Yes.
think
And
we
you,
can-
and you may be off on that balance one way or the other. It's
We
hard to
could be.
tell.
And I think we can do that better, though, in the Enforcement Bureau. We can manage that better than we can in, say, where we have the necessity to have every seat filled in the jail.
Right.
That's the one that is much harder to manage as
Oh,
far as the
sure.
overtime, because we can send people home. And if we are short, then we're just not finding that much more crime, even though it's happening. But it's something that can be managed easier than it can in the correction
And I
side.
think if I'm hearing you correct on this, Commissioner, is that, it's hard, I don't know how you would demonstrate that management either to us, because it's hard to say, look, we managed this one, we could have sent everybody out there, or we could have sent, more people out there, but we didn't. I don't know how we see that.
yeah, I don't know.
And I don't know how we
It's
measure
proving a
that.
negative, and it's
Right,
how do you do that?
how do you prove that? You just,
But I do know that I think we can still manage the increase in what we are being called to respond to in the non-proactive area, because those things are coming in anyway, just because of increases in population. But we could still bring up, that would be the increase you would see, would be to bring up those proactive arrest numbers to help take that crime off the street that we're not getting now.
So the irony to me is, and this is again not your problem, but the law enforcement officer for our county
Yeah.
has told us that crime is down as far as what we're able to catch. Yet we had a request for 7 additional attorneys because the workload seems to be increasing at an
yeah, and that's the
exorbitant
balance,
amount, and that's
that's
the
the
problem.
balance that we're trying to balance.
Right.
When we see the courts,
Right.
they're going down,
right.
and we're asking for more law enforcement to, bring it back up. And we're not trying to say there's quotas in there or anything like that,
Right.
but we have this dichotomy that's
Well,
just not
and
working.
again, that's the thing, that's because we have decimated the proactive teams, the dedicated proactive teams, those that are always first to go out and try to crush the crime that is occurring, that not just reacting, like the regular patrol teams, they're more reactive than proactive. Those two, the traffic team and the canyon team, we have decimated their numbers because we've been down 6 and 7 people. So they take those numbers out and put them into the non-proactive, reactive teams to try to cover
But
what's
from a
coming
revenue
in.
standpoint for the county, the traffic team
understand.
makes more money than
I understand.
because most of us speed
But both
and
need
most
to
of
be
us like
done.
traffic school.
That's my point, is that they're both represent crimes that are occurring or have occurred, and they both affect the public safety and the well-being of the public that are out and about in our unincorporated area.
Right.
Quick question. I'm just curious why this is so much farther down on your priority list.
Well, to be honest with you.
And listening to your reasonings and discussions.
Let me answer that one.
From my
Is it not one or
perspective,
two?
I'm kind of going,
Right.
why wouldn't this be a number 1 or 2 if our utmost task is public safety? Why is this, and we
Because-
could get more proactive,
Right.
why is this so far
That's a
down the
good
list
question. That-
on your
that actu-
priorities?
It's an excellent question. Our fear is to lose the capability of the people that already exists.
Okay.
We can't suffer any further degradation of their capability due to training, equipment, or overtime that they need to do their job in lieu of hoping to get 6 more people and then having everybody else not having the equipment they need to do. So it was more of a calculated risk to say, we can't accept any further reduction in capability if we don't get these things up here. This represents additional capability that we would love to have, and we feel we need to have, but we certainly can't slip any further back down the road if we don't get this stuff that's above it.
Sure, but, so, going back along those lines, so I'm going back to what I hear Knudsen telling me. Sometimes for traffic accidents, fare machine and all this stuff goes out.
Depending if it's a fatality.
So what if the commission funds and gives 2 additional traffic, right? We know that there's a direct correlation in revenue that offsets a portion of that.
Right.
But at the same time, in my mind, and again, this is my simple mind saying, I know if you guys are out there enforcing speed, everybody slows down, less accidents, therefore safer roads, and some of those resources aren't overburdened. Whereas on the other teams, I don't comprehend it near like you guys do. But that one I can get there. So I guess how do we determine the priority? Because to say we can fund all of them, I don't know that we can.
I understand.
So
Yeah.
inside of that, is there room that you see as the law enforcement officer to say, you know what, yeah, traffic, I don't know. There's the rec team, I don't know.
Right. Well, and there are revenues that are not really captured as far as understanding that come to this county directly related to that. The $18 surcharge. And we're between $50,000 and $70,000 a month that comes here based on those activities and that $18 surcharge. Those go directly though into the general fund from what I understand, but they're never attributed out to the fact that if the work's not done on that traffic team, those funds also go down. But I get that payout notice every month that comes to the county. And statistically, we're the only county in the state, as you remember, the state cut 10% across the board
Right.
for the court funds based on a reduction of that surcharge money. Ours is the only county that didn't go down in the whole state, based on some of the activity that we have been able to do. But we certainly aren't where we could be. But the problem is, they're allocating that across the state, so we may not even get an increase even if we did the work, based on the fact that statewide, those numbers are down. So it goes back into a factor that the state controls sometimes that we don't get. But I can say from the public safety, regardless of funding, the public safety issue, this public will be safer if we have those teams out there, making sure that they're not being, preyed upon when they're up in the canyon, walking the trails or trying to camp. Or that the roads up there that are narrow and can't afford those speeders to come down there without impacting, accident rates. The public is much better off if we could get those increases. And we would be able, if we could get those 6 additional people, that would allow us to probably dip in less, I know it would, less into backfilling out of those 2 prime proactive teams when we get them on board. Because then we can go down to a certain level without trying to drag one of them over to take into the regular patrol team from that proactive team to cover our expectations on just patrol.
Okay.
Did that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
27 just follows up with kind of the same need. I think obviously the higher need is to get bodies out on the road to help facilitate. This is a reflection of just the increase in. Years ago, a couple of years back, we moved a detective position over to the SET team to help with the proactive drug investigations that are going on. Those guys have done a phenomenal job. Those
Yes, they do.
3-man wrecking crew have been phenomenal with arrests, and there's some stats down there. Won't go into those.
There are over 400 arrests this year. I mean,
Yeah.
that's for a 3-4-man crew.
They do a better job than I think anybody in this county.
Well, because they
has
have the
to.
time to be targeting, and
Yes.
they're not having to do the reactive. They are strictly proactive, and that's probably a good example of what can happen when you can leave a proactive team alone without having to impact that reactive stuff. But you do have to do the reactive stuff when people call in to report a crime.
So this request would be just one additional for that team, and then one additional for the investigation division as a whole that they lost to put
Hey.
into that set team there.
Going back to my investigations division, I'm still, even though
Sorry,
I've tried
that-
to have these meetings 18 times with you guys and the attorneys.
So yes, that
The
is-
difference between the investigations that the attorneys call investigations and you guys call is what?
we handle all the theft. The regular investigations unit we have with the sheriff's office handles all the incoming calls, criminal calls related to theft, death investigations, not associated with officer involved. They handle
Right.
suicides.
Or white collar crime.
We don't do the white collar.
They only do white collar and officer involved.
Yeah, to
As
my
far as we know.
understanding.
Okay.
And I don't know how much.
Everything
that-
else.
How many, how big is your investigations team?
Which regular investigations we have?
If we don't add anybody, how many?
6? So you have 5.
So do we have more officer involved shootings and white collar, or do we have more of the other in this county currently?
I don't know that I can answer that. I think you'd have to ask them, but I think there's more white collar than there are
Well,
shootings.
I mean, officer
hope
involved
so.
shootings obviously make the news, so I'm
Right.
pretty sure I know that
Yeah,
number.
yeah. I'm sure there's much more white collar.
So you both have the same number. Okay.
We have, fraud, we take
This is-
care of fraud.
This is, obviously, my comments are not intended at,
I-
at or for
yes.
you.
No, I think what you're getting at, though, our caseload is a lot
I think
higher.
I've identified where we might be able to fund some of this.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
And I think what our caseloads are, around 40 per
We're
detective?
average between 30 and 40 at a time, which you get any more than 25, it becomes very cumbersome for a detective to keep track and do a thorough job on these investigations, dealing with witnesses and victims and putting the effort into them they need.
Okay, so one for each.
Yes.
Is your request.
Yeah. 28 is just, the ATVs used by the recreation team are old, becoming non-usable. They were originally received through other funding for the Forest Service. These aren't search and rescue, this is just patrol.
Yes.
Sorry, it's recreation team vehicles, ATV.
Yeah.
And
No,
the-
I'm just trying to, I'm going back to what Lieutenant Rice said. I thought Lieutenant Rice said that we're taking motorcycles and patrolling them.
Well, in some places, like going up a Mary Ellen's Gulch, let's say you go up a AF Canyon on the Forest
Okay.
Service land. Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, let's say backcountry.
Yeah.
I just wanna make sure we're not doing the same areas,
Yeah, no,
because I'm
no,
like,
no.
the
This is-
motorcycles seem a little better than the four-wheeler on
Yeah.
some of those
These are
trails.
these are out 5 Mile pass, going to
Yeah.
help assist and do proactive enforcement out of those areas or recreation areas
Mary
out on the
Ellen's
A
Gulch.
desert.
Diamond Fork where there's not.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, a 900-pound Harley on a dirt road up in Mary Ellen's Gulch.
Okay, so
isn't
again,
very efficient.
I would like to see that, I know, I'm trusting you gave it to us, but I'd like to see the asset list, the years, and we did this to the surveyor a couple of years ago. We made him do the same thing. We just want to see the assets and what the time schedule is for usefulness.
Then the 29 would just be a request for a civilian position within the patrol division to assist with in-car cameras, digital documenting, storage, going out to assist with fixing in-car camera problems that we consistently have a problem with, making sure our in-car camera systems are working, helping out with some of those issues that the deputies just may not have that specific knowledge to do, or the time to do it in, with that.
So it's a real high priority, I can tell for you.
Yeah, well, it's a need, but it's not as needed as putting some guys on the road. 30, if Lieutenant Pashon wants to talk about that, let me just hit 31 prior to him taking that airplane.
I don't know that there's a need to talk about 30 yet. I think I'd like to see that stuff probably more. I'm sure you've got a breakdown. I don't think we need to spend time necessarily on that, because the writing's pretty self-explanatory. I just like to see a quote on the new one that you'd like. Well, I'd like to see those options like you did with the boat. For me, I don't. Sure.
Okay, and then the 31, I left that as, we're in motions, Lieutenant Shipman can help me out with where we're at. We had that $5,000 to fix the machine, the X-ray machine over at the Justice Court that's been down. Can you give us an update on that? Apparently, there's another part that they may be able to fix for that. So it is working. So scratch 31. How long ago was that? Last week? Thursday, okay. So that was done after this was submitted. So 31's a non-issue. And then I only put those 3 other items for just discussion purposes, depending on what we're able to do with that evidence facility.
The first one,
expansion.
that's being discussed with already the county's looking at facility management.
Okay.
The training facility at Thistle Range, remember that request for TRCC funds?
Yeah.
And I told you go through Lisa, that's
Same
what
thing.
you'd need to do there.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I just want to clarify on that. The TRCC can only be used for the portion that's accessible to the public.
Right.
So I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that was
But for the
clear.
facility, what they had talked about was a portion of it being used for hunter safety and public, and
Right.
so they would have to come for
Exactly.
that.
So you
Just
would
like hot
assess a
house.
percentage, like
Ye-
the 30% or 40% would be public and 60 would not?
Yes.
And then present it that
So
way,
you
right?
need a plan for what the plan
Total-
is for the building,
Yeah,
and
and then the
then
percentage
how,
for-
what percentage of that, then we could come and apply for that.
Okay,
So,
got it.
Perfect.
Just my point being that TRCC probably wouldn't eliminate this request in its entirety because
Right.
there's a portion
So
that's probably
percentage.
not available for the
no,
public.
it's probably, TRCC is
Okay.
probably only $30,000 of a $200,000 facility type
And it's,
building.
it's not a given, it's a request.
Yes.
So it's not
Correct. We know.
something that you can just
Correct.
pencil in and say it's in there.
Yeah, we understand that. Then the last thing I just wanted to bring up as part of Public Works or whatever, we've identified the need with Judicial Division to have a better panic system within the county buildings here to be able to have these guys respond, and we can work towards that, figuring
have
out
one?
who would be responsible. Well, we need,
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I know when I've accidentally hit it. I did get that phone call 3.5 days, no, I'm just kidding.
No, Larry showed up every time I pushed that button.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
Didn't know what the button was about, and I kept pushing it because there was no label on it.
Yeah,
To figure out what it was. He shows up.
yeah.
He
You
goes, "What's the
okay?"
problem?" I
Yeah.
said, "Things are great, no problem." He walks away.
Quit
What is
pushing
that
the button.
Where we need it.
And just so you know, I do have panic written on it now on the side.
Does that include, for example, I guess what I'd like to see on that is what that would look like and the areas. So that would help us. So like up in HR, we built those glass walls. We've talked about in the treasurer's office, not by we, I mean them and I as their portfolio guy, about where the safe is and stuff like that. So I'd like to see a breakdown on that and what the cost would be, because to me, that would be a much better allocation of some of their internal service fund money for this building than some of their other carpet replacements in the seats you're all sitting in.
well, I thank you for your patience on that. Is there any more questions on the enforcement side before wildland
No,
fire?
Thank you. Let's just take a 5-minute break.
Yeah,
and
let's
then
do
we'll
that,
come back.
please.